I waited all day for my son and his wife to visit on Mother's Day. They didn't come. And then I saw the pictures. They were smiling, sitting at a table full of waffles and mimosas. And it wasn't my table. It was hers, her mother's. There was no mistake, no miscommunication, no emergency. They had chosen where they wanted to be. And it wasn't with me. It was a Sunday like any other, except it wasn't. Not to me. It was Mother's Day, my second one since Dale passed, and the first since my best friend Lillian lost her battle with pancreatic cancer last fall. I felt the weight of both losses that morning, not crushing, but steady, like someone had laid a heavy quilt over my shoulders the moment I opened my eyes. But I had a plan. I always do. Fred, my only son, and his wife Jennifer were supposed to come over for lunch. We hadn't locked in a time, but I mentioned it on the phone earlier that week, and Fred said, "Yeah, that should work." So I took that as a yes. That was my mistake. I spent Saturday cleaning the house, not just tidying. I polished the good silverware, washed the windows in the dining room, and even ironed the table runner, the one with the little green leaves stitched at the ends. Dale always liked that one. Said it made the room look like spring even in January. I went to the farmer's market early and bought lilies, fresh ones. I put them in a vase on the dining table. I wore a soft blue blouse with tiny yellow flowers, something cheerful, not flashy. I made my lemon meringue pie from scratch. The one Fred used to ask for every birthday from the time he was 10 until he left for college. I'd seen it on sale at a bakery once, but he said it wasn't the same. So I made it the way he liked it, tart with just enough sweetness. Tall, fluffy meringue on top, browned slightly in the oven. I even had to separate the yolks by hand, since I couldn't find my little egg tool. Took me 3 tries, but I got it right. Lunch was simple but thoughtful. Baked ham, fresh rolls, that little potato casserole I only make when someone's coming over. I wasn't going to sit there alone with a cold sandwich. By 10:30, everything was ready. I set the table for 3, folded the napkins into triangles like Lillian used to do when we had bridge club at her house. I took a picture of the setup, just in case I wanted to text it to Ruthie later, and show her I hadn't let the day go to waste. I boiled water for tea and turned on the little radio in the kitchen. Soft jazz, not too loud. By 11:15, I checked my phone. Nothing, but it was still early. I figured they were running behind or maybe picking up flowers. Jennifer always liked to show up with something in her hand. Store-bought cookies, a new potted plant. One year, she brought an orange-scented candle and said it was from both of them, though Fred looked surprised. At noon, I turned the oven down to keep the food warm. At 12:30, I sent a quick text. "Hope you're still coming. Everything's ready." No reply. At 1 p.m., I walked to the front window and looked out. My driveway was empty, just the reflection of my own face in the glass, my reading glasses halfway down my nose. At 1:45, I turned the music off. At 2:30, I put the pie in the fridge. The meringue was starting to droop. I sat down on the couch and turned on the news, but I didn't hear a word they were saying. My eyes kept darting to the phone. Every time it buzzed, it was a weather alert or some app reminding me I hadn't logged my steps. And then at 3:02 p.m., I made the mistake of opening Facebook. Right at the top of my feed, there they were, Fred and Jennifer, at a place called Birch Plus Vine. I didn't even know what that was. One of those brunch spots with rustic wood tables and tiny menus written in chalk. The caption on Jennifer's post read, "Happy Mother's Day to the woman who taught me everything." And there was her mother, smiling, holding a glass of champagne, wearing pearls. Fred was seated next to Jennifer, holding her hand. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I couldn't believe it, but because I could. Deep down, I'd been expecting it. Or at least something like it. There was no mention of me. No, we'll stop by later. No, love you too, Priscilla. Not even a generic Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Just a perfectly filtered photo of a moment I wasn't invited to. And here I was dressed for company, pie in the fridge, ham going dry in the oven. A table set for a family that didn't show. I poured myself a glass of tea and sat at the table alone. I looked at the 3-place settings, the folded napkins, the untouched casserole, and I realized this wasn't an accident. They knew. They just didn't care enough to say it out loud. That part stung the most. If you've ever made a whole meal for someone who never even bothered to call, click subscribe, if only to remind yourself you're not the only one. And if you're not subscribing, then leave a comment and tell us why you'd rather watch quietly while someone else hurts alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of quiet that presses in on you, makes every little sound louder. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock, the wind outside tapping the gutter, just enough to remind you that you're alone. The leftover ham was packed into containers and stacked in the fridge. The lemon pie went untouched. I scraped a bit of meringue off the side with a spoon and then put the lid on. No appetite, just habit. The smell of baked ham still hung in the kitchen, sweet and smoky. I almost opened the window, but part of me didn't want the scent to leave, like it would be a waste to erase all that effort in one swoosh of air. I walked into the dining room around midnight, just stood there looking at the table. The folded napkins were still in place. I hadn't moved them. I didn't have the heart. One glass still had lipstick on it from the tea I poured myself earlier. It was strange. I felt like a visitor in my own house, like I'd thrown a party for ghosts, and they'd RSVP'd. No. I wandered into the living room and sat on the couch. I pulled the old quilt over my legs, the one Dale's mother gave us when we got married. It's worn thin now, but soft. Familiar. I closed my eyes and tried to picture something warm. My mind went back to when Fred was little, back in St. Charles, before everything got so quiet. We used to take him to Silver Lake Park every May. He'd run straight to the swings while Dale set up the blanket under the same tree every time. I'd bring tuna sandwiches and a cooler with lemonade. One year, when Fred was in 2nd grade, he handed me a Mother's Day card made out of dry macaroni and Elmer's glue. The O in Mom was crooked and missing 3 noodles. But he was so proud of it. He hugged me tight that day, got glue on my blouse. I didn't even care. I remembered the way Dale smiled when Fred wasn't looking, like he was proud of the both of us. He always said, "You were made for this, Pri. Made for being a mom. Made for family. For showing up. For being the one who never forgot birthdays or holidays or the little things in between." That memory hit hard, because now I can't remember the last time Fred hugged me like that. I'm not sure when things started to change. Maybe it was after Dale passed. That first year, Fred called every Sunday. He checked in. He even came by to help me fix the dryer when it made that rattling noise. Jennifer was polite, distant but polite. But little by little, the calls got shorter. The visits more spaced out. Sometimes I'd call and he'd text back 2 days later with, "Sorry, been swamped." Jennifer was always nice enough, but never warm. The kind of nice where you know they're already halfway out the door in their mind. She brought store-bought cookies to Thanksgiving once and said, "We're trying to cut back on sugar anyway." Then took half the leftovers home. The last few times they came over, I noticed things were different. They'd stay just long enough for the food, then make an excuse about needing to meet friends or being tired from work. Jennifer never offered to help clean up. She'd scroll through her phone while Fred watched whatever game was on. I'd be in the kitchen, scraping plates alone. Still, I kept trying. I told myself they were busy, that they were juggling too much, that it would swing back the other way. But deep down, I knew better. Last Christmas, they said they'd come by after dinner at Jennifer's parents'. They arrived close to 9, already full, and only stayed for 30 minutes. Fred kissed me on the cheek and said, "We'll do a proper visit soon." I'm still waiting on that. Now, sitting in the dark, I kept thinking about today, about how I sat at that table, dressed for company, food on the stove, phone silent, and they were laughing with her mother over Eggs Benedict and orange juice in crystal glasses. Not a text, not a call, not even an emoji. I know I wasn't forgotten. It wasn't that. I was ignored, skipped over, and that hurts more. I don't know when I stopped being mom and started being a calendar event they could cancel without notice. Maybe it was gradual, like a candle burning low without you realizing how dim the room's gotten. Or maybe it was just today. Maybe this was the first time I truly let myself admit it, that I'm not part of their picture anymore. I'm not angry, not yet, but I feel something bubbling underneath the sadness. Maybe it's just disappointment, or maybe it's the start of something else, something that's been waiting to speak up. The day after Mother's Day, I woke up early, even though I hadn't really slept. I made a small pot of coffee and stared out the kitchen window while it brewed. The sky was overcast, and the neighborhood was still quiet, except for a dog barking somewhere down the street. I didn't bother fixing breakfast. I wasn't hungry. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee, and thinking about how different things used to feel. Around 9, I heard the gate creak. Only one person uses the side gate without knocking first. It was Ruthie Peterson, my next-door neighbor for 32 years. She's 76, sharp as a tack, and says exactly what's on her mind, whether you're ready for it or not. She stepped onto the porch with a brown paper bag in her hand. "You up?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. I opened the screen door. "Barely. Well, I brought muffins from that place you like on Main." She held up the bag. "Blueberry, and whatever the other one is." I didn't ask her how she knew I needed company. Ruthie has a sixth sense about these things. She knows when I'm quiet too long. We sat on the porch, the same one Dale built after he retired. I poured us glasses of sweet tea, and we split one of the muffins with a plastic knife from the drawer. I didn't say anything at first. I figured if she'd come all the way over, she probably already knew. Ruthie took one sip of her tea and sighed. "So they didn't show, huh?" I nodded. Not even a call. She leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. I figured. I saw that picture. The brunch post. My niece follows Jennifer. Sent it to me last night. I looked down at my glass. "You saw it." "Oh, honey." It was all over her page. Like it was the 4th of July or something. We sat for a while, the wind picking up just enough to rustle the porch ferns. Then Ruthie said something I'd been thinking, but hadn't dared to say out loud. "Jennifer's always had plans that didn't include you, and Fred's too soft to say no." It landed like a brick in my chest, not because I hadn't noticed, but because I'd spent years pretending I didn't. Ruthie kept talking. "I'm not saying he doesn't love you. I'm saying he's scared of rocking the boat. Always has been. Since he was little. That boy never knew how to speak up without looking over his shoulder first." I let her words sit there between us. I didn't try to defend him. I wanted to, but I was too tired. "She runs the show," Ruthie added. "That woman makes decisions like she's handing out orders. And Fred, he just nods. She didn't even text. I whispered, I know. She just acted like I didn't exist. Ruthie reached over and patted my hand. You do exist, just not where she's looking. We sat in silence again, the kind of silence that comes after the truth gets said out loud. I finally asked, do you think they'll come around? Ruthie took a bite of muffin and chewed it slowly. Maybe, maybe not. But you can't keep putting your joy on hold waiting for someone else to find their manners. I looked at her. What does that even mean? It means you don't need permission to start new traditions. You don't have to set a table for people who don't show up. You've got people who would love a seat if you offered it. I don't know, I said. It feels wrong. Like I'm giving up. Giving up on what? Being invisible. That hit me. Ruthie leaned forward. Let me ask you something. If next year rolls around and they don't come again, would you still set the table? I looked away. The lilies on the porch were wilting already. I hadn't watered them since Saturday. I don't know. Well, maybe it's time to figure that out, she said. The rest of the morning passed in slow conversation, some about Fred, some about old memories, some just about the weather. Ruthie doesn't rush anything, but she always knows when it's time to leave. Before she got up, she pointed at me and said, You're allowed to miss them, but you're not required to wait on them. I nodded. She walked back through the side gate without another word. I sat there on the porch for a long time. I thought about the question she asked me, about whether I'd set the table again next year if I knew they wouldn't come. I honestly didn't know the answer, but I was starting to realize something. Maybe the question mattered more than the answer. Maybe the real question was why I kept setting it in the first place. Have you ever needed someone to say the truth out loud for you? If so, click like, and if not, tell us why it's easier to stay quiet. I wasn't looking for anything special that morning. I was just trying to stay busy. The kind of busy that keeps your mind from slipping into places you don't want it to go. It was 2 days after Mother's Day. The house still smelled faintly like baked ham and pie crust, and I couldn't stand sitting still anymore. So I grabbed an old laundry basket and decided to clean the hall closet. That closet hadn't been touched in months, maybe longer. It's the one near the guest room, mostly filled with winter coats, extra towels, and the kind of junk that piles up over the years. Boxes of photo albums, unopened Christmas decorations, a shoe rack missing 2 screws. I sat on the floor and started pulling things out, one by one. I folded the towels, wiped down the shelves, and made a pile of old scarves I hadn't worn in a decade. And that's when I saw it, tucked behind a stack of old board games and a rolled-up yoga mat I never used. There was a small wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. Plain but solid. No lock, no dust, just a piece of masking tape across the top, with handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. For Priscilla, if you're ever feeling forgotten, it was Dale's handwriting, slanted and neat, just like the way he signed our birthday cards. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the box. My hands felt warm and shaky all at once. I didn't open it right away. I walked to the kitchen, made a fresh cup of tea, and sat down at the table with the box in front of me. Just looking at it made my throat tighten. I finally lifted the lid. Inside was a single folded letter and a small metal key attached to a red paper tag. The letter was written in Dale's handwriting, blue ink on plain lined paper. It started with my name. Priscilla, you spent your whole life holding this family together. Every holiday, every school project, every broken appliance, you made it all work. You loved us when we didn't deserve it. You forgave us when we didn't say sorry. And you stayed strong, even when the cracks started showing. I don't know what the future holds, but if there ever comes a day when you feel left behind or looked over, I want you to remember one thing. I never forgot you. not for 1 second. This key is to the safety deposit box. Ask for it at Blue Ridge Bank. It's in your name, and it's yours. No one else's. No explanations needed. Love you always, Dale. I had to set the letter down. It felt like he'd just spoken to me from the next room. Like he'd seen this moment coming before I did. I picked up the key. Small, smooth, worn just enough to feel real in my hand. I turned it over and over, reading the tag. Box 214, Blue Ridge Bank. I didn't even know Dale had a box there. We had one years ago for the house deed, but we closed it when we refinanced. I sat back in my chair and stared out the window. The yard was still, the bird bath nearly empty. I could hear a lawnmower 2 houses down, but the world inside this kitchen felt like it had paused. He had planned for this exact kind of day, this kind of feeling. I ran my hand over the edge of the box and whispered out loud, "What did you do, Dale?" He wasn't the type to leave surprises. He was practical, quiet. He paid bills early and kept every warranty in a labeled folder. But once in a while, he did something unexpected, small but meaningful, like the time he left me a single daisy in my coffee mug after our first argument, or the time he mailed me a postcard from the hardware store just to make me laugh. This felt like one of those things, except bigger. That night, I put the letter back in the box, set the key in my purse, and made a note to call the bank the next morning. When I laid down in bed, I didn't feel sad for once, just curious. There was something waiting for me, something Dale had tucked away in case the world ever turned quiet on me, in case Fred got too busy, in case Jennifer made other plans, in case the people I'd given my heart to decided they didn't need it anymore. He'd left me a lifeline, and I was finally ready to find out what it led to. He remembered her, even when the others didn't. If someone ever protected your heart like that, click subscribe. And if you've never known that kind of love, tell us in the comments why stories like this still pull you in. The next morning, I called the bank, Blue Ridge Bank, just 5 minutes from the old grocery store Dale used to stop at on his way home from work. I hadn't been inside that branch in over a year, not since I closed our joint savings after he passed. I gave my name, told them I had a key, and was looking for a box marked 214. The woman on the phone was polite, said I could come in that same morning and to bring a photo ID. So I did. I parked right up front and sat in my car for a minute before going in. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror, brushed a crumb off my collar, fixed the little spot of lipstick I'd missed. Inside, the branch was quiet, bright lights, soft music playing, but it felt cold in a strange way. The kind of place that holds secrets in filing cabinets. A young man in a gray vest came out to greet me. "Mrs. Madison?" "Yes." "Right this way." He led me to a small room in the back. Concrete walls, a little table, 2 chairs, and a locked cabinet. He asked for my key. I handed it over, and he opened the door. Then he pulled out a thin silver box marked 214 and placed it in front of me. "I'll give you a few minutes," he said. He left the room and closed the door behind him. I sat down, slid the lid open, and looked inside. There were only 3 things. The first was a small manila envelope. I opened it carefully and unfolded a document. At the top, it read, "Property deed, Geneva Township, Wisconsin." The name on the deed was mine. Just mine. I looked at the date in the top corner. It was from 10 years ago, signed and notarized. I didn't know what to make of it at first. I'd never been to Geneva. Dale never mentioned buying anything up there. The second item was a folded sheet of paper. Another letter, in Dale's handwriting. It said, "Priscilla, this is yours. A place to rest when the world gets too loud or too quiet. I didn't tell you about it because I didn't want you to feel responsible for it. It's not for family gatherings, not for holidays, just for you. A place to sit by the water and remember who you are. Go when you need it. No questions. Love always. Dale. I put the letter down slowly. My hand was shaking just a little. The last thing in the box was a folded check. I opened it. Cashier's check, $75,000. Payable to Priscilla Madison. I sat there staring at it for a long time. $75,000. In my name. No one else's. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt a tear drop onto the table. Not from the money, not even from the cabin, but because Dale had done this for me without ever saying a word. He must have known. Not the exact day, or the exact way, but he knew life might get heavy, that I might find myself sitting at a table alone one day, wondering if I mattered. And instead of waiting for that moment to come and hurt me, he built something quiet and steady to hold me when it did. A cabin, a check, a reminder that I was never forgotten. I folded the papers, placed everything carefully into my purse, and walked out of the room. The young man smiled as he held the door for me, but I could barely return it. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even surprised anymore. I was something else. Grateful, relieved, seen. Later that afternoon, I looked up the address on my tablet. The property was right near a lake, just past the edge of town. I clicked on the map, zoomed in, and saw a roof surrounded by trees. No photos, no listing, just a red pin sitting quietly on the screen. I stared at it for a long time. Dale had always said retirement was when we'd start traveling, but we never got the chance. Life had its own plans. Illness, bills. Then time just slipped. But now, here was this little place waiting. Just for me. I made a decision right then. I would go. Not next year. Not someday. Soon. Maybe it wasn't about the cabin itself. Maybe it was about letting myself step into something that wasn't wrapped in guilt or waiting. Something that was just mine. And just like that, I felt the weight of yesterday lift a little. I folded up Dale's letter and placed it beside the one I kept from the closet. I read the last line again. Go when you need it. No questions. And for once, I didn't have any. I didn't pack much. Just enough clothes for a few days, my journal, and a tin of tea bags. I left early on a Thursday morning, right after breakfast. I told Ruthie where I was going, gave her my spare key, and said I'd call if I needed anything. She didn't ask many questions, just gave me a hug and said, go see what he left for you. The drive to Geneva took just under 2 hours. Rolling hills, quiet highways, a few farms with laundry hanging on clotheslines. I kept the radio off. I wanted to hear my thoughts for once. The closer I got, the calmer I felt. The directions Dale had written in that letter were still fresh in my mind. He'd said to look for a small blue mailbox tucked between 2 pine trees on a gravel road just past mile marker 62. And there it was. I pulled in slowly. The gravel crackled under the tires as I turned onto the narrow path. At the end of the drive sat a small white cabin with green shutters. Modest, quiet, nothing fancy, but it looked cared for. There was a little porch swing out front and a flower bed along the steps, though it was mostly weeds now. I sat in the car for a minute before getting out. I wanted to take it in. Dale had been gone a while now, but somehow this place felt like he had just left it waiting. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the air. It didn't smell musty or closed up, just clean, like cedar and something familiar I couldn't quite name. There was a small kitchen, a 2-seater table, and a worn-in armchair next to a bookshelf. I ran my hand over the counter and looked around. Then I saw them. Family photos on the shelf. me and Dale at the Grand Canyon, Fred's high school graduation, a picture of our old backyard where Dale had built that crooked birdhouse. Folded neatly on the arm of the couch was my favorite blanket, the one I always kept in our den, the one I thought we lost in the last move. And stacked beside it, a small pile of books, Dale's old westerns, the ones he used to read every night after dinner, flipping each page with one finger while stirring his tea with the other. I don't know how he did it, but it felt like he built this place just from memory, just from knowing what I'd need. I boiled water on the stovetop and made myself a cup of chamomile tea, sat in the old chair, and opened my journal. I didn't write anything deep or poetic, just started with, "I'm here, Dale. You did good." Then I wrote whatever came to mind. No edits, no stopping. Later that afternoon, I put on my walking shoes and followed a path out back that led down to the lake. The water was still. A few ducks floated along the edge. There was a small bench tucked under a tree. I sat there for a while, breathing in the quiet. No phones, no emails, no one needing anything from me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting on anyone. That night, I made a sandwich and ate it on the porch. I wrapped the blanket around my legs and rocked in the swing until the sky faded to blue. And when I finally went to bed, I dreamed of Dale. He was sitting on that same porch swing, smiling at me with that half grin he always had when he thought he was being clever. He didn't say anything, just looked at me like he was proud. I woke up with a tear on my cheek and a calm in my chest I hadn't felt in years. He had known. Somehow he had known I'd need this, a place to come back to myself. I looked around the little room again, and I realized something. I don't need to beg for a seat at someone else's table anymore, not when I have one of my own. 2 weeks after I got back from Geneva, I got a text message that told me everything I needed to know. It was a regular Tuesday. I had just finished folding a load of laundry and sat down with a glass of water when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was from Fred. We hadn't spoken since before Mother's Day. I opened it and read, "Sorry we didn't get to connect on Mother's Day. Things got crazy." Just like that. No call, no apology, no explanation. Then, right underneath it, "By the way, Jennifer wants to know if you've thought about setting up a power of attorney or anything like that, just so things are easier to manage down the line." I stared at the screen for a good minute, let the words sit there, try to figure out what "things got crazy" meant, but I knew it didn't matter. What mattered was that they weren't checking in because they missed me. They were checking to see how much I was in control of, or not in control of. And that last part, easier to manage down the line, that wasn't about helping me. That was about planning around me. I could feel it. They weren't asking out of concern. They were asking out of calculation. For a second, I thought about calling him, asking what he really meant, giving him a chance to explain himself. But then I remembered Mother's Day. I remembered sitting at the table I had set for 3. I remembered the pie I put in the fridge, untouched, the lilies that had started to wilt, the way my chest had gone still when I saw them smiling in that brunch photo like I didn't even exist. I remembered Ruthie's words. "She's always had plans that didn't include you, and Fred's too soft to say no." And she was right. I looked back at the text again. Things got crazy. That's what people say when they want to skip the part where they take responsibility. And that second message, it wasn't even from Fred. It was Jennifer using his phone. That's how it always worked. Her voice, his fingers. I typed out a reply. "Thanks for reaching out. I've already taken care of everything." Short, polite, nothing for them to push back on. And then I opened my contacts, scrolled to Fred's name, took a breath. and removed him from my favorites list. I didn't block him. I didn't delete his number, but I moved him out of that special spot he'd held on my phone for years. That tiny star next to his name? Gone. I closed my phone and set it face down on the table. And I sat there, not crying, not angry, just clear. Something had shifted. It wasn't a big scene. No screaming. No slamming doors. Just a quiet decision that I'd had enough. I'd spent so long trying to earn their attention, hoping if I made things easier, lighter, more convenient, they'd come around. But I finally saw it for what it was. They didn't want me involved. They wanted me managed. They didn't want a relationship. They wanted access. If your name only matters when money's involved, hit that subscribe button. And if this story makes you uncomfortable, go ahead and comment. Tell us why you'd rather scroll past than admit what this really is. And that's a hard truth to swallow when it's your own child. But I wasn't going to ignore it anymore. I got up, poured myself a fresh glass of water, and sat back down with my journal. Wrote down the date. Today I stopped making excuses for people who treat me like a backup plan. I underlined it twice. Later that evening, Ruthie called to check in. I told her what happened. Read her the text out loud. She didn't even hesitate. Classic Jennifer, she said. She sees you as a hurdle, not a person. I said, you think Fred knows what he's doing? She paused. He knows enough. And he knows better. That night, I made a simple dinner. Ate on the porch with the radio playing low in the background. I watched the sun go down and let myself breathe. There was a strange comfort in finally saying no without saying much at all. It didn't mean I stopped loving Fred. It just meant I stopped pretending his silence didn't speak volumes. You can only stare at an empty chair for so long before you realize it's time to stop waiting for someone to fill it. That's what Ruthie said one morning while we were trimming her rose bushes. I had just finished telling her about Fred's text. She listened, clucked her tongue, then looked me square in the face and said, "It's time to use that good table for people who actually show up." I knew she was right, so I told her, "Let's do something." She blinked. Like what? I don't know. A little lunch. Some flowers. Something easy. Her eyes lit up. We'll call it the Garden Girls Get-Together. I laughed. That sounds like a country music band. Well, she said, then we'll serve iced tea and sing off-key. So that's how it started. We put out word through the community bulletin and the senior center, just a note that said, garden chat and potluck, bring a dish and something you're proud of growing. The following week, 5 women showed up to my backyard with potato salad, peach cobbler, tomato plants, and enough laughter to fill a whole summer. We sat around my patio table, plates in our laps, telling stories about stubborn weeds and squirrels that stole tomatoes. One woman, Noreen, said her late husband used to whisper to their dahlias like they were children. Another swore by crushed eggshells around her roses. Ruthie told everyone I once tried to grow a lemon tree in Missouri and killed it in under a month. They laughed. I didn't even mind, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't hosting out of guilt or expectation. I was hosting because it felt good. We didn't take pictures for social media. No hashtags. Just passed around second servings and asked who wanted coffee. A few days later, I was at the market picking up sweet onions and flour when I met Valentina. She was the cashier, maybe 23, 24, polite, soft-spoken, but something about her eyes reminded me of someone trying to hold too much in. We started talking while she scanned my groceries. She asked what I was making, and I told her about the garden lunch. She smiled, then paused for a second and said, "That sounds really nice. My mom used to do stuff like that." Used to? I asked gently. She passed last year. She said, "I live with my aunt now. It's fine, just different." I didn't say much, just handed her the coupons and told her, if you ever want some tea and too much pie, I've got both. She smiled. I might take you up on that. And she did. The next Sunday, Valentina knocked on my door, holding a small bouquet of daisies and a Tupperware of something called arroz con leche. We sat on the porch and talked for 2 hours. She told me about her mom's recipes, how she worked 2 jobs, and how hard it was to find quiet people in a loud world. I told her I knew the feeling. That visit turned into weekly tea. She'd bring cookies or questions about plants. I'd give her leftovers and stories she said reminded her of home. We were an odd pair, I guess. Me in my 70s, her barely out of school. But it worked. One day she said, "You remind me of the mom I wish I still had." I didn't know what to say, so I just put my hand on hers and nodded. If you've ever had to build your own family from scratch, hit subscribe. And if you're not subscribing, comment and explain why stories about healing still make you stop and listen anyway. After that, I started thinking about what else I wanted to do. Not to fill the silence, but to build something new in it. So I got out my stationery, the same kind I used to write thank you notes on after Fred's birthday parties, and wrote out 10 simple invitations. Join me for a late summer lunch. No fuss, just food and good company. Come as you are. Bring nothing but yourself. I dropped them off around the neighborhood. One at the quilt shop, one at the library, one to the man who runs the tiny garden stand on Main. One went to Valentina, of course. No RSVP cards. No checking who could or couldn't make it, because this time I wasn't counting chairs or hoping people would squeeze me into their schedule. I was simply opening my door. And whoever came, those were the right people. That was the difference. I wasn't chasing invitations anymore. I was creating them. No waiting, no hoping, no pity, just people who wanted to be there and made time to show it. And honestly, that's what family should feel like. Last year, I waited all day for my son and his wife to show up on Mother's Day. This year, I didn't wait at all. I woke up early. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt calm. There was no ham in the oven, no pie cooling on the counter, no table set for 3 that wouldn't be filled. This year, I baked one cake, just one, a simple lemon bundt with powdered sugar on top. I cut a few fresh flowers from the backyard, peonies and some pink roses Ruthie helped me plant, and placed them in a mason jar on the kitchen table. That was enough. Around 10:30, the front door opened without a knock. Ruthie came in carrying a glass dish covered in foil. "Sweet potato hash," she said, "with extra garlic." I smiled. "You always lead with the good stuff." A few minutes later, Valentina arrived with a carton of orange juice and a little boy named Isaiah from the next block who carried a folded keyboard under his arm and said, "I learn a new song for you." By 11, the house had 8 people in it, some from the garden club, one neighbor, and even Ms. Riley from the library, who brought blueberry muffins in a basket lined with cloth napkins. We sat at the table and passed around eggs, muffins, stories, and second helpings. Nobody asked where Fred was. Nobody looked at the clock. And for once, I didn't feel like something was missing. I looked around the room and saw something different, something I hadn't seen in years. Warmth, not perfection, not tradition, but something real. After brunch, Isaiah plugged in his keyboard and played a little tune he called Sunshine for Miss P. I clapped louder than anyone. He blushed and asked if he could come back next week to learn a new song. I told him he had a standing invitation. Valentina gave me a card with daisies drawn on the front and a note inside that read, "To the mother I found when I needed one." I had to excuse myself for a minute, went into the hallway, pressed my hand to my chest, and let the tears fall quietly. It didn't feel like sadness. It felt like something healing. Later that evening, after the dishes were done and the last guest had left, I sat down with a cup of tea and opened my phone. Right at the top of my feed was a post from Jennifer. Same restaurant as last year. Same brunch photo. Same caption. Happy Mother's Day to the woman who taught me everything. There they were, Fred and Jennifer, sitting across from her mother, holding glasses of mimosa, smiling like nothing had changed. And maybe nothing had for them, but I had. I didn't zoom in on the picture. I didn't read the comments. I just smiled, closed the app, and opened Valentina's card again. I kept reading that line. To the mother I found when I needed one. That's the thing about family. Sometimes it finds you in the most unexpected ways. I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool, and the sky was a soft purple. I sat in Dale's old rocking chair, pulled my journal into my lap, and whispered, "Dale, I'm not alone." I just got quieter, so I could hear the right people. This year, I didn't try to be part of someone else's day. I made my own. And somehow, it felt more like Mother's Day than it ever had before. If you've ever had to rebuild your family one chair at a time, subscribe. And if not, tell us in the comments, what makes a mother's love real? And what happens when it's ignored? Like this story? Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There's more ahead. You're not alone.